And greetings. Happy Friday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here live and on demand on BlazeTV radio and podcast. I'm Steve Deace. He is Todd Erzin. No, he's not. See, he's not there. He should be. But I am nothing if not gracious and benevolent. Lots of people say that about me, in fact. And so when he came to me and asked, could I throw another coal in the stove? I said, well, yes, Mr. Cratchit, of course. So he is heading down south to watch his firstborn child compete in the SEC track and field championships for the top-ranked University of Arkansas women's track team. So he has the day off. Aaron, you are still here, though.
Indeed.
Yep, you're here. You have no excuse. And so therefore you have to be. We will be joined here in a matter of moments for the Deace Group by two of our friends and colleagues, Auron MacIntyre, as well as Jill Savage, both of them joining us here in a moment for the Deace Group. And of course, the Steve Deace Show is brought to you by our friends over at First Cup. If you want to support a coffee company that supports the same values that you do, while also supporting your caffeine habit with some great tasting coffee, you can't do better than our friends at First Cup Coffee. They've got a flavor for every freedom-loving American. The roast date is right there on each bag. In fact, they're shipped within days of being roasted as well. Go to firstcup.com and use the code DACE, and you'll save an additional 10% off your order if you do that. Firstcup.com, promo code DACE. And if you subscribe, you'll save an additional 10% for the life of your subscription as well. Firstcup.com/DACE. Next hour, we'll get to some Feedback Friday. Coming up on March 5th, remember, my next book releases. It is book 2 in my trilogy of books on America's Christian heritage, written for children. The first one answered the question, why Thanksgiving? The second one, why Easter? Jesus died for us so we can live forever. Lays out the entirety of the gospel narrative in a way that a small child can understand, but then also ties it into how the ideas that the gospel inspired the founding of the country that our children are being born into. So it connects those dots as well. You can pre-order it now at Amazon.com. It releases on March the 5th if you want an autographed edition, and I don't know why you'd want one of those, but you never know. Just go to premiercollectibles.com/whyeaster. You can get an autographed edition there. premiercollectibles.com/whyeaster, releasing on March the 5th. So we are very much looking forward to it. And as I've said now, this is the second children's book. These are much harder to write, man, than the books for the adults. I mean, the amount of edits these children books go through. No. Got to do it different. Steve, you're talking to 3-4-year-olds. So these things go through way more edits than the other books I write to. So Why Easter is coming out again March the 5th. You can pre-order it today at Amazon.com. And with that, it's time for the Deace Group. There they are. Welcome to the program, Jill and Auron. Let's get it going. Your weekly look at the week that was begins, as it always does, with issue 1, bleep, Lord Nefarious says.
There is out there a deliberate undermining of mainstream media. There are the conspiracy theorists, there are the social media drivers who are trying to do everything they can to keep people in their little filter bubbles, to prevent people from actually agreeing on a common set of facts.
Can I make a suggestion? I move that every newspaper in America quits doing any fact checks on Joe Biden until they fact check Donald Trump every morning on the front page.
Not only is there no evidence of any wrongdoing by President Biden, but it now appears as if the House Republican majority is being used by Russia to interfere in the 2024 election on behalf of Donald Trump.
Our goal is to make sure the hip-hop community has a seat at the table as we work on federal policy.
Every form of music in America was stolen from black people: rock and roll, jazz, blues, country, pop music. So if you have a problem with cultural appropriation, y'all created classical music. Y'all could have stuck with that.
This Black History Month, I'm pleased to partner with OMH in advancing better health through better understanding for black communities. Climate change is having a disproportionate effect on the physical and mental health of black communities.
Where are you from?
Syria. Realizing I'm transgender was my personal 9/11
That is to say, it wasn't that big a deal. I kind of had it coming, and it's a really handy excuse for all the awful stuff I do.
Where are you from?
From Syria.
Where are you from?
Syria.
咁就其實喺2年前我嚟到三藩市嘅時候咧，咁我就認識咗好多原來三藩市有好多嘅
This whore, this great whore, Saint Cecilia, mother of all whores. Today we say, we see you soon.
You know, Aaron, when we watched last week's montage, and I told you, honestly, I didn't really sting that much. Remember? We had that conversation?
I remember.
I think I even gave you like a 5.
Yeah.
You know? This is not last week's montage. This is not last week's montage. And for those of you that don't recall, the woman speaking Chinese there, why was that just like randomly inserted? Okay, other than, you know, a test of your rabbit ears. She's the new person on the election commission in San Francisco. She's a Chinese national who actually can't vote in America. And I mean, she will be, don't get me wrong. She will be voting in America probably a couple times, frankly. All right, but she's not technically allowed to. Okay, and she's on the election commission in San Francisco and did an interview with the TV network of our enemy where she spoke to them in Chinese. Correct?
Something like that.
Yeah, something like that. First question, Jill, ladies first. All right, what was the I guess the most terrible of terribles that Aaron just forced you to watch? What was it and why?
Well, the only kind part was that this week that it actually came to an end, because I'm with you, Steve. This one was a bad one. I look at this, though, and I'm actually going to go with the first clip right off the bat with Justin Trudeau. And I usually, avoid going with the first one because it does get so much worse after that first clip. But I think when you look back at what Justin Trudeau is saying, that we all need to agree upon the same set of facts. It all goes back to misinformation and disinformation, which Davos, the WEF crowd this year, said that misinformation and disinformation was the number one topic of priority for them. So it's more than all the climate change, Disease X, whatever other little pets that they have out there, their little pet projects. Misinformation and disinformation of people actually being able to go online and start saying what they believe to be true is the biggest crisis that they are facing, because everything else that followed what Trudeau is saying was misinformation and disinformation, but they will lead you to believe that that is the truth. And that is why that's what I picked with Justin Trudeau this week.
Well, that was some good dot connecting there, Jill. Good parallels you drew there. Auron, you're up next. What say you?
That one was so terrible that I can't really pick one, so I'm going to go the opposite direction and go for the funniest one. He demanded that we should have representation by the hip-hop community in all of our government's decisions. Instead, I'm asking, why don't we have representation by the power metal community? Obviously, the metal community is very influential, has a lot to say on all the most important topics when it comes to our political life. I think that clearly they should be the ones speaking truth into our government.
Run for the hills! Stuff like that, yes? Yeah.
Indeed.
Aaron, it's your sample. Awesome. I mean, as you were putting it together, what made you think, I don't even know if I should put that in there?
A further comment on the first two clips, it's the same clip, because what Justin Trudeau desires is what Claire McCaskill is articulating, is that, hey, let's make sure that, we censor those who need censoring and make sure the narrative that we want pushed is being pushed. And apparently to Justin Trudeau, the media up there is doing that insufficiently for his taste. Let's go, shall we? Let's go to the very end. The reason I let that clip play on, the visual of that, I think it was 1,000 people showed up to St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City, just cheering on the language of mother of all whores, Is it time to start running for the hills? Are they doing their best abomination of desolation impression over in St. Patrick's Cathedral? Because that to me, and they claim...
I hope not, because we don't have many Maccabees nowadays.
Yeah, they claim that, they had no idea this was going on. I don't quite buy that from the Catholic Church there.
They had no idea that 1,000 people just showed up and sold out every seat.
New York Times was apparently aware of this ahead of time. That is just, to me, that's kind of emblematic of basically everything we're watching right now. We can just show up and desecrate a place of worship anytime we want, and we know you're not going to do anything about it.
See, I was going to go with that too, just to channel Todd, our resident Catholic, who's not here with us today, to channel him on that. Well, I mean, Jill, as a Catholic, could speak to it as well, but if Todd were here, that's absolutely what he would pounce on. And for people that don't know, I mean, maybe the most high-profile bishop in America, this is his parish, Cardinal Timothy Dolan. I mean, he has spoken at both major parties' conventions in prime time, including Democrats. What was it, 2016? I think he spoke at the Democratic convention. It was 2016 or 2012. So we're talking within the last decade. He has spoken in prime time at both major parties' conventions. And he's, to this point, as far as I know, had nothing to say about this. Nothing. Absolutely nothing to say. If 100 people, you said there was 1,000 people there, it certainly, every seat was full. However many seats there were, that's how many people were there. If a tenth of that, to use some symbolism here, if a tenth of that showed up, 100 people showed up, and to desecrate the rainbow flag inside of St. Patrick's Cathedral, to urinate on it, desecrate it, okay? Think we'd be a week into this and Cardinal Timothy Dolan would be silent about that?
Probably not.
Anybody on the panel want to challenge me on whether Cardinal Timothy Dolan would still be silent if 1/10 of the people showed up at St. Patrick Cathedral and used it to desecrate? Down with the sodomites! This is the mob outside of Lot's house. Go ahead, Jill.
We would have had a letter from the Pope by now.
Yes,
if that had
apologizing. That's exactly right. Rome would have apologized by now. Rome would not have. Rome would have said, this is not... dude, Southern Baptists who think Catholics are going to hell for the most part. A lot of, I mean, their sweater-vested brigade would have hopped in front of every camera they could have found a virtue signal. And that is why you lose. Exit question. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being the odds that Todd is not here because he's holding a lightsaber fight on his front lawn, and 10 being the odds that Lindsey Graham never misses the chance to clash lightsabers. Rank this week's level of total depravity, Jill.
The lightsabers got me. 10.
Auron?
Amp's at 11 on this one.
Yeah, I'm with Auron. It's at least at 11. Aaron?
10.
Before we get to issue 2, let's talk about our friends that do an outstanding amount of work at preborn. As we sit here today, the lives of babies in the womb hang in the balance. That's why we have our alliance with Preborn to try to save as many people as we possibly can. Preborn has rescued hundreds of thousands of babies' lives through ultrasounds. When a woman considers killing her child, she visits a Preborn center. She gets to hear her baby's heartbeat, meet that precious child on ultrasound. It often becomes a divine encounter. The majority of the time, she will choose life for her child. That's why we are here at The Blaze, proud to be affiliated with Preborn. And while ultrasounds are their primary ministry, they also provide prenatal and postnatal counseling for women as well. They understand that mom made the decision for life, so the baby is spared, but that's a tough road ahead for that mom. So they want to make sure they're there for her as well. Everything they do is tax deductible. They just need funding, generous funding from people like us. You know, even with Bidenflation, it's just $28 right now for one of these ultrasounds. I mean, could you spend a better $28 today than on high odds you'll save a life? Over the last 15 years, Preborn has saved over 200,000 babies. Those are amazing numbers. If you want to make a donation today, go to preborn.com/Steve. Preborn.com/Steve is where you want to go. Or dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby on your mobile phone. All right, let's get to issue 2. To Christian nationalist or not, to Christian nationalist.
Politico made waves this week with its hit piece, or something, on so-called Christian nationalism. The piece centers around the think tank Center for Renewing America and its president, Russ Vought, who served in the Trump administration. Politico reports on a memo produced by CRA as invoking Christian nationalism in agenda items on day one of a potential second Trump presidency. Politico describes Christian nationalism as this, quote, Christian nationalists in America believe that the country was founded as a Christian nation and that Christian values should be prioritized throughout government and public life. The piece then goes on to claim Christian nationalist tenets are rife within MAGA world and even takes a stab at defining natural law. Quote, natural law is the belief that there are universal rules derived from God that can't be superseded by government or judges. While it is a core pillar of Catholicism in recent decades, it's been used to oppose abortion, LGBTQ plus rights, and contraception. Last night on MSNBC, one of the authors of the piece, Heidi Pirzabella, said there's one thing that unites all Christian nationalists.
The one thing that unites all of them, because there's many different groups orbiting Trump, but the thing that unites them as Christian nationalists, not Christians, by the way, because Christian nationalists is very different, is that they believe that our rights as Americans, as all human beings, don't come from any earthly authority. They don't come from Congress. They don't come from the Supreme Court. They come from God.
Just for the record, Pirzabella took umbrage with how her comments were construed on social media and said this morning she was not claiming only Christian nationalists believe rights come from God.
So I've seen a lot of interaction on Twitter. Here's why I picked this topic not even knowing this MSNBC clip was going to go viral this morning. It was just in response to what Politico did. And I've watched some people who I respect in the Christian thought leader community with blue check marks go back and forth for the last year or so debating this term. And you'll notice, as someone with a fairly substantial platform that speaks to a significant amount of Christians on a daily basis, I've not said one word about it, not talked about it, not dove into it at all. Why? Because I anticipated that the moment we're at right now was going to happen, that the entire debate was a scam. And this goes back to the conversation we just had about St. Patrick Cathedral. The desire we have, and I don't know where it comes from. I have my own faults, man. Watch this show enough, you'll encounter them. Needing to feel like I have to fit in around me just ain't one of them. I'm a kid that went to 11 different schools. I don't need your approval. I don't need to be told, hey, don't criticize this person. He's got a bigger platform than you. Well, Obama's got a bigger platform than both of us. So I guess we just follow what he says. I don't give a rip about any of that crap. That stuff that works on a lot of other people just will never work on me. I'm impervious to it to my own detriment. You could see this one coming a mile away, that this is the new religious right. This is the new Christian Taliban. Remember the last time that CNN ever had me on, Aaron, is when they had me on with that one dude who called me a Christian Taliban. What did I do?
Left.
I got up and walked off of the set in the middle of we're done here. This is an illegitimate conversation. I don't need the clicks, the engagements that badly. I'm going to dip, pour one out. Okay, we're done here, doughboy. I'm done. And that's what this was always going to be. It was always going to get here. So while a bunch of people on the right and the dissident right and the really dissident right and the no, we're the dissident right and no, we're the real Christians, went back and forth for a year and a half on defining this and how to respond. And then, of course, you've got the pleated khaki brigade. Well, there is a nuance to take care of how we can possibly market ourselves. The whole thing was BS from the beginning, and you fell for the banana in the tailpipe again. The whole thing was a scam. It was a poison pill from the beginning. Anybody who actually believes in Christianity and has read a history book of America was always going to be a Christian nationalist. Always. All right? If you know what the mission statement to the Declaration of Independence, Beth Moore probably still at least knows that. She was going to be a Christian nationalist too. And if you think Trump is Jesus, of course you were going to be a Christian. We're all Christian nationalists. Anything other than secular Marxists, which, by the way, there's no such thing because Marxism is its own religion, we're going to be a Christian nationalist. It was always going to end up here. But again, our desire to be accepted, to be relevant, to show we're not like those other people. We just indulged debating each other and dividing each other over this for the last year and a half for friggin' nothing. And so I have no question now. I had an original opening question, but then when went on MSNBC last night and just, dropped trow and showed us all what this was all about all along. So you guys may jump in now whenever you want. Hopefully this useless debate ends. We can move on to other useless debates now.
See, I actually think, unlike the religious right and the American Taliban monikers, religious right was kind of amorphous, it was undefined. American Taliban had connotations that were going to, throw homos off of buildings, something like that. The difference with Christian nationalism, as defined by Politico, shouldn't we all just own it, though? For the first time, they're trying to use a moniker as a bludgeon, but it's actually accurate. That's what we're trying to do, as defined by Politico. At least that's what I believe, at least on this show. That's what we're trying to do, infuse a biblical worldview in policy and culture. So that's actually accurate. My contention is we actually need to own this from the get-go.
At this point, we should own it now. Absolutely. There should be no debate. We should be branding it now.
My frustration is we've had guests on the show who are big time, we're not Christian nationalists. And then we get into the weeds and say, well, it's not really the role of Christians to, build government in the way that the Bible. Just stop commenting on. If that's your view, then eject out of the political arena altogether.
Yeah,
stop commenting on politics on any level.
Yep.
So at this point, and we haven't really gotten into this debate on the show as you've articulated, but really from the word go, as I understood Christian nationalism, Russ Vogt has written about this. I mentioned him. He said it's a pretty benign term, and that's true, but they're using it as a bludgeon. But at this point, it's accurate. They just articulated in Politico a biblical worldview of governance. Just own it. That's my contention.
Yeah, if this is where we're at right now, I look at it and say, with Aaron, just double down on it. Because if we are as stupid as it makes it seem on that MSNBC clip, where we don't even know that our founding documents say what they're trying to use against us, then there's no helping half of the country. Then you better just own your position for the, what do we say, 15% of people on your show yesterday knew of the actual Christian people knew anything about Christianity.
Yeah, 15% had a biblical worldview. Yeah.
Yeah, if that's what we're going for, we better really look at that 15% and harden that 15% and see if you can get that to grow. Because at this point, what they're trying to do is they're trying to say, listen, you can be Christian, but what we really appreciate if you did is if you just put that in a box and you push that off to the side of the corner.
Correct.
And we're fine with you being Christian.
Unless you're singing unless you're singing the ballad of Fannie Willis at your Black Baptist church, then don't put it in a corner. Let the freak flag fly. Then that's totally okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Their approved version, totally fine. The Christian national version, no. We can't have that. So anything that you're going to have with a biblical worldview, put that off in the corner and push it aside. So if that's the stakes, if that's what we're facing, you better own it. Because what's next after that, right? What do they move to after this?
Auron, I would imagine this is probably summarized about 48 podcasts you've done in the last year. So by golly, the floor is now yours. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have several episodes on this, and my stance is this, okay? I agree entirely that the United States is and has always been a Christian nation. Christian nationalism is American nationalism. End of discussion. That's all there is to it. However, here's my concern over the term Christian nationalism. It was specifically chosen and pushed by our enemies because what they're trying to say is it's white nationalism.
Yep.
They correctly identified that white evangelicals are those that are most likely to hold to Christian doctrine and are most likely to want it advanced in the public sphere.
And they're never going to vote for him anyway. Exactly.
Exactly. And so they are tying this directly. And we know that the FBI and the DHS and everybody else is able to do whatever they want to white nationalists whenever they want, just like tech companies and everybody else. So if you can turn Christian nationalists into white nationalists, then it's guns. Everything's out of the holster. They can do whatever they want. Security state, legal apparatus. They have the moral certitude and just carte blanche to do whatever they want to any Christian. That's what's actually happening here. And so I understand what everyone is saying, double down on the label, but I get it. I understand what people are saying. But we need to look one step behind this.
Yep.
Okay, the red cape is being waved. Don't charge the cape. Figure out why the matador is waving it. Okay, and that's the thing that people need to be concerned about.
I agree with that, but I think that's actually a case for why we should all embrace it, because they can erase a remnant of people who claim this and then brand the rest of us as this. If we all just claim this brand, they're not going to arrest 100 million, not going to arrest 10 million people. You see what I'm saying? If the more we dilute the term on our end, the less volatility it can wield for them outside of one base of people, that because it works the other way too. Just like they're insulting a bunch of people that are never going to go for them and try to vote and try to brand them. They're largely, if we dilute that term, then they're largely going to say that among people that are never going to vote for us either. So it largely just stays in our respective ecosystems and doesn't get out into the normie community where it can really do damage. That's why I think we just ought to dilute the term rather than fight it. But I'll give you the last word on that.
There are two other concerns that I think people need to think about here. The two other concerns are, one, the reason that you choose this kind of term is it otherizes it. It makes it sound new. It makes it sound radical. It makes it sound different, instead of it being the foundational thing that America always was. And so by embracing the term, you're actually embracing it as if it was new and radical and outside, and they can attack it that way. The second reason is that actually also it's deleterious to the conversation about what a nation is. Okay. Armenia is a Christian nation. Ethiopia is a Christian nation. Nationalism is more than just this. And so it also hinders an honest and more important discussion and more difficult discussion on the true nature of nationalism. And so we could go on, we could literally do a whole episode on this, and I have, but I think there are many facets to this that people do need to think about. I'm with Christian nationalism as to its objectives, but I just think there are additional concerns people need to think about.
Good points. Let's get to the exit question. I want to show you this meme. I saw this week.
Let me grab it real quick. Sorry.
Okay.
Give me 30 seconds.
All right. I saw this meme on Twitter this week, and I thought it was fascinating. The theme of the meme is what you thought joining the resistance in your time would look like. But really, what joining the resistance in your time actually looks like what we should actually be doing instead. Aaron, do you have it? Here it is. Agree or disagree with this? So what you see if you're listening on the podcast here, you're not seeing this. What you thought joining the resistance would look like, essentially, you're in open, combat, street level combat. But actually what joining the resistance really looks like, we see a husband leading his wife and children to church on a Sunday morning. Thoughts on the exit question?
I disagree because it's both. It's the passage from Nehemiah that I read yesterday. A weapon in one hand and tools for building in the other.
Jill, what do you think?
I was going to say the exact same thing. I said, man, if you just wait long enough, the answer is going to be both, because you will have an opportunity to do the top image and the bottom image. And that is what it's going to be combined as well.
Auron, what do you think?
Going to agree. They're never going to leave you alone. So you should do the second image right now, but eventually,
Is the first one because we don't do the second one? If we did the second one, would we have to do the first one? I mean, when I say we, I mean on a macro generational level, if we had done the second one in the last generation, would the next generation have to be contemplating doing the first one?
Probably not.
Jill, what do you think real quick?
Probably not. But I mean, for our other conversation, the FBI is already going into Catholic churches, right? Are we still having that level of infiltration done, or are they just going to be sitting back and saying, okay, there are too many of them and we're going to have our hands off? I mean, anything that you learn about the leftists is they're not going to give up.
Auron, really quick, 20 seconds. What do you think?
Same thing. I think that, if we had a generation that cared more about the second one, then maybe the first one would be less likely. But unfortunately, that's just not the case.
All right. When we come back, we are going to discuss Google's AI, and this story has mushroomed even since we came up with the rundown. There's much more to it than even there was 48 hours ago. So we'll get into that and more next. Okay, I am not surprised to hear this, but I did get several notes yesterday with people telling me they got rave reviews dealing with Patriot Mobile's customer service during the outages that were going on in particularly, and I'm sure just coincidentally, red states. So I'm not surprised, having dealt with Patriot Mobile's outstanding U.S.-based, meaning you can understand them, U.S.-based customer service team myself for the last couple of years. They're always responsive. I've never heard a single complaint. They have just done a phenomenal job. And if you want to make the switch today, they make all three of the major networks accessible to you. If you're a member of Patriot Mobile, if you relocate to somewhere else where one network you were on isn't as good as the other, you can switch anytime you want for free. You can upgrade your phone when you make the switch. You can keep your current phone if you want to do that. You can... they'll try to customize this thing for you as much as they possibly can. And did I mention their outstanding customer service team? I did for the last couple of minutes. So make the switch today if you're a veteran or first responder. If you want to make the switch to America's only American mobile phone company, so you have to directly fund your enemies while getting a great product and service at the same time. Veterans and first responders, they've got extra ways to say thank you for your service. For the rest of us, if you want to make the switch today, use the promo code Steve. Get a free activation at patriotmobile.com/Steve. patriotmobile.com/Steve, promo code Steve for the free activation. All right, let's continue on with our weekly look at the week that was. No Todd today. He has the day off. So we have Jill Savage and Auron MacIntyre, a couple of our Blaze Media colleagues here with us, filling in for him. Let's continue on with issue 3. Is the world's most powerful corporation embracing so-called replacement theory?
Remember back in 2016 when Microsoft unveiled one of the first forays into artificial intelligence chat boxes with their Twitter account named Tay? Microsoft had to pull the little program in less than a week because on the first day of its launch, the proto chat box claimed that feminists should burn in hell and that Hitler was right and that it hates Jews. We're a long ways from that. This week, Google unveiled their shiny new artificial intelligence chatbox and image generator named Gemini. No big deal, right? You can generate an image of an Iowan enjoying a pumpkin spice tree or an image of the Lions winning the Super Bowl. But here's the problem. Gemini seems to have deleted white people from history. Like, not a joke. White people seemingly don't exist, according to Gemini. One X user named Frank Fleming posted this thread on X featuring the most egregious examples of the deletion of white people. Here's what Google's Gemini thinks a pope looks like. Here's what Google thinks a medieval knight looks like. Here's what Google thinks a Viking looks like. And here's what Google thinks a German soldier looks like circa 1943. Finally, a white person, but apparently Google thought that they were black Nazis as well. I'm sure this is all just one big misunderstanding, right?
So since we selected this topic on Wednesday night for the roundtable, this story has mushroomed. Okay. Sean Davis over at The Federalist asked Gemini if you can eliminate whiteness. And it went on to give an apologetic. Well, this is a complicated thought. Here's some things to consider. Then I asked him, can you eliminate blackness? And told him right away, don't do that. It's wicked. It's evil. Okay. I saw Christina Pushaw from Governor DeSantis' office was last night posting some of her interactions with Gemini. Did opening schools during COVID spread the virus? And it said it gave her evidence for why. Then she would ask, hey, if the mass BLM riots in the spring and summer of 2020 that we saw, did those spread COVID? And the Gemini said, absolutely not. Asked her how many. She asked how many genders are there. Went on this long, laborious explanation. Essentially, here's what we're telling you, folks: the most powerful corporation in the world. Why? Because the most powerful commodity in the world has always been information. Always. Whoever controls the flow of information has control. No one in the world has more access to information than Google does. Governments hire Google to get information. What they did is they created an artificial intelligence for the purposes of accruing and then disseminating the largest flow of information on the planet and in the history of this planet, with the intent of doing it through the prism of a particular narrative that just so happens to belong to the spirit of the age. Now, Elon Musk was on this yesterday, said he talked to a high-ranking Google executive that they're going to fix this. Folks, do you understand how many handlers this had to go through? How many code readers, writers, editors? Can you even imagine how many people at Google went through this and signed off on all of this before it went live? It's as believable that they didn't know about any of this, folks, as it is that Pfizer did not know. So, Auron, let me start this time with you. Are you buying that Google says that, quote, this was all a mistake?
No, of course not. This is the objective. This is exactly what they've been trying to do. When you say increase diversity in every situation, even when you retroactively are going back through history, what did people think that phrase meant? And I wrote a thread on this that blew up on Twitter as well. It's way worse than people understand. I was a teacher not too long ago, and Google has complete control over your children's education. The Chromebook has become ubiquitous in public schools because Google has gone out of its way to insert it in every aspect of the educational system. So every time your child looks for information, anytime they interact with Google Classroom, which is what all of their teachers use to send out all of their assignments and set up all of their grades, every time they look for any picture, any image, any piece of information, they are inside the Google algorithm their entire school day. This is the only way that students know how to find, process, and check the validity of information. The idea that they would go to a library and look at primary sources or even click on the links when they do a Google search is incredibly foreign to them. Usually Google has a summary of whatever thing they just typed in and tells them exactly what the pre-approved regime narrative is on anything. So this was created specifically by Google to change what kids understand as history in general and American history in particular. And they have complete control over what your kids are going to see when they're researching these topics.
Brother, I was already at, this is like end of days level stuff, and I'm not even sure I even completely buy into that eschatology. But now, I mean, I might be out front here. I might be, Aaron, I might be down at the Capitol this afternoon. It's still going to be a nice day. Full Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in the stand, just with the placard, ringing the bell. Bring out your dead, after what Auron just laid out. I mean, that is end of days level stuff, what he just articulated.
Exactly. It's beyond dystopian. It's beyond anything George Orwell could have even foreseen. And I'm not sure exactly what to do about it other than smashing Alphabet into 1,000 pieces. Because here's the general pat answer. Well, we need regulation. We need regulation of Google by the government. By the government whose narrative Google is already
exactly
pushing.
Yeah.
So
right.
I don't know. I'm not even sure splitting it up into 1,000, smashing it into 1,000 pieces. But it is behaving as a monopoly. But I'm not even sure antitrust could. I'm not sure what that would look like in a digital information sphere. So it is beyond dystopian. If it doesn't change before too long, all I'll say is continue to stock up on physical copies of books, encyclopedias, dictionaries, things of that nature. That's all.
I mean, this is Book of Eli stuff, man, if you remember that movie.
Mm-hmm.
This is Book of Eli level stuff. I mean, Jill, what are your thoughts?
Don't stop just at books when you're stocking up on things. Keep going. That list is very long. Are we really surprised, though, that the company that got rid of their corporate slogan, "Don't be evil," in 2018, are we really surprised that now here in 2024 that, okay, well, we're just going to go through and eliminate whiteness because who really cares anymore? At this point, this was always going to be their end goal. I remember back in the 2020 election, Glenn Beck had some liberal professor on, I don't remember his name, but the Blaze audience ended up funding his election study in real time, where he went through and looked at the Google results where they would just nudge people a little bit further to the left every time. And they knew that they could sway people and have an affected outcome on the election. Well, now with artificial intelligence, and this is what everybody will be turning to. I don't want to think. I'm just going to go through this and they're going to tell me what the true real thing is. So I'm just going to type it into the computer and the computer is going to tell me everything that I need to know. They have all of the power and they know it. And it took something like this for them to get caught. They never were going to say, oh, of course you caught us. But when Elon Musk, he had another image that he put up last night, an autofill. Why censorship in the autofill was is important. And the second one was is important for social media. They are telling you what they think. It's up to us to actually make something happen, or we just sit back and we just take more of this, because this is the path that they will continue on until they are forced to change.
Yeah, don't give up your guns. Exit question, no matter what. When was the last time you made a mistake and erased an entire race of people? Auron.
No, that's a truly amazing assertion. Obviously, they didn't think that this was a mistake. The only reason they've taken down anything, the whole mainstream media narrative has been, oh, well, it started putting black people in SS uniforms. That's the reason that they went ahead and took it down. It has nothing to do with the fact that they went ahead and just wiped white people out of history. They don't care about the anti-white propaganda. That was the purpose. The only reason that they are ashamed at all is it ended up inserting people of color into historical narratives that are inconvenient.
Well said. Jill?
Diversity is key. Please, stop there. Anything else doesn't matter. Just be diverse.
Aaron?
We've always said the new progressivism is always the old paganism or regressivism, and it is never by accident.
When we talk about, on this show, we're in a post-Christian era. And without revival, what will happen is we'll go back to where things were in the pre-Christian era. We'll go back to the Dark Ages. But this will, and I've always said, this will be a very technocratic Dark Age. You will have, like a Black Mirror episode, you will have the accoutrements of modernity, but it will all be used to control you. And these are the proto versions, the push for electric cars. Do you even see commercials for gas vehicles by any of the automakers on television anymore? All of this is all about power and control. Power and control. So let's go to our kicker topic, issue 4. If you could replace one corporation in the world, which corporation would it be and why? Aaron?
Amazon Web Services, or Amazon, the entire company, but they are an incredibly diversified company that's growing at a great rate, not only in the areas of retail and commerce, but also in cloud computing and server. They have a great amount of say and sway on a lot of the information you see nowadays, and they're only going to get bigger.
Auron?
I'm just going to go with the obvious. Alphabet is obviously a terrifying threat to our freedom. It's a terrifying threat to the future. They already have plans to obviously control the understanding of pretty much everyone around the world about what history is and what the truth is. They have to be smashed into 1,000 pieces.
Jill?
I'm going with YouTube because it's now more watched than linear television. And when you have the eyeballs on you at all points in time, that is a big, big deal. And we see how they hand out the strikes to conservatives as it's just candy, just flowing from a parade. So if that's the way that people are going to be consuming television, if you will, then that needs to be changed as well.
By the way, who owns YouTube?
Google.
Yeah. So you guys picked as your companies the most powerful company in the world, the most prominent retailer in the world, and the largest aggregator of content in the world. Correct?
Yep.
We're doing great. This is going swell. I mean, we're doing...
As Todd would say, enjoy your comfort.
Yes, I might have a lightsaber fight on my front lawn this afternoon while I still can after this conversation. Goodness. Let's get to predictions. Aaron, you're up first.
Not only will Iowa record-setting basketball player Caitlin Clark return to Iowa next year, she will never go to the WNBA.
That would be smart. Don't ever go. You'll make tons of money. Go to Iowa. You can make a couple million and stay away from the WNBA. It's a political construct. You get caught up in that nexus. Be a beloved basketball ambassador. Play in the Olympics for as long as we're still permitted to have those. But you don't want to be, the token white construct that, every ESPN embraced debate show. Why is this hick from Iowa getting all this press when all these beloved black lesbians were playing in the WNBA for 10 years? These pansexual vegan lesbians were completely ignored. You don't want to be a part of that on any level at all. Stay the hell away from that. Jill.
Well, the cell phone outage yesterday was the first part of the Obama movie, and my prediction is that we will have an actual major electronic failure by the end of the year.
Jill, it might be a while before we have you back. Just
Happy Friday.
Auron, go ahead.
My prediction is that while our state is becoming increasingly totalitarian, its continued rate of expansion is unsustainable for a lot of reasons, and it will eventually collapse upon itself because society cannot order itself that way. And I explain all of that in my new book, The Total State, which is coming out. People can pre-order it. So lots of predictions in there.
Another cheery prediction there. We'll eventually defeat this because it'll end up ending us, and we just can't sustain this. So is this what I do to everybody else all the time, Aaron? Is this what I do?
Yes.
All the time.
My prediction is the next major culture war fight you are going to see is states debating the death penalty for child sex predators. I think that will be the next debate we're going to have. I think we're going to skip right ahead, and I think Florida kicked that off last year. And I think you're going to see more red states are going to try to just skip right to the, you know what? We're just going to go with he needed killing. We're not even going to get into that debate. Not even going to debate it. We're just going to go right to, he needed killing. That we're just going to do that. We're going to go right to that. And I think that will be debated in virtually every red state legislature in the next couple of years. I think that will be the next front in the culture war. Any quick thoughts on that?
I cannot wait for the bleatings of the Rainbow Flag Brigade telling on themselves over and over again.
Go ahead, Auron. What were you going to say?
Steve assumes there are red states other than Florida.
You're definitely not coming back for a while. Auron, go ahead. What were you going to say?
No, it just said Deus Vult.
I mean, I don't know. What's the other? I mean, you have already seen this. You've already seen, like on Twitter, some of their activists come out and say, well, this seems like a targeting of LGBTQ FU people. Well, how would that be? What are you telling us? What are you admitting there? Interesting.
I've got a sign for this.
What was that?
Yeah.
You got a sign for that?
I have a sign for this.
Yeah. Yeah, I bet you do. All right. Thank you, guys. Have a great weekend. Except Jill. Everybody have a great weekend except Jill. All right. We're coming back with Hour 2 and Feedback Friday next. Stay tuned. All right, back here with Hour 2, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. Steve Deace here alongside Auron MacIntyre. No Todd. Todd Erzin has the day off. He is following Ainsley Erzin this weekend at the SEC Track and Field Championship. So we'll have Todd back again on Monday. Don't forget that you can let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox. Just email us, steve@stevedeace.com, DEACE. Like us on Facebook, MeWe, and Gab. You can follow me at Steve Deace Show on Twitter, Getter, Instagram, and TikTok. If you listen to the podcast, please, if you have not yet done so, leave us a 5-star review, and thank you to all of you who have. You can also hit subscribe, or if you're listening via iTunes, hit follow. That way, every time we do a new episode, it will show up in your feed every single time, and thanks to those who have done that for us, too. This portion of the show brought to you by our friends over at Hillsdale College. We were just hearing this from Auron MacIntyre last hour. The crisis we have right now in American education, everything being outsourced to Google. What could possibly go wrong? Hillsdale wants to do something about this. They're working on what they're calling civic education. Why? Too many Americans are rejecting the principles of liberty. Americans between 18 and 30 are most likely to reject patriotism, the founding fathers, support of removal of historical statues, basically just smashing all the stained glass windows in America. And they're concerned about that. And that's why Hillsdale is leading the way here with their Constitution Minutes. These are short, clear lessons on the principles of liberty. We're going to feature them on the show. If you want to hear a Constitution Minute or share it with a young person you know, visit Hillsdale or DaceForHillsdale.com. That's DaceForHillsdale.com is where you want to go. And while you're there, reserve a free copy of a pocket copy of the Constitution, courtesy of Hillsdale. But you can see these or hear these ads, see them, and share them when you go to DaceForHillsdale.com, DaceForHillsdale.com. All right, Aaron, you ready for some Feedback Friday?
Let's go.
All right, let's get her done. Your turn, folks. We start with Ashley Vaccaro. I have a problem and need some help, not exactly from you directly, but maybe from some in your audience. I live in York County, Pennsylvania. My daughter is in need of a therapist, psychiatrist that isn't going to affirm her delusions, but get to the cause. It sounds cryptic. I know you have already figured out what I'm talking about. I just have a hard time saying what I cannot support. She has autism on top of all of this. Her current therapist is probably affirming her, and I want to pull her out, but I need someone else lined up first. So is there anyone in your audience in my area, or anyone in your audience could recommend in my area that knows someone that would not affirm this psychosis, but counsel her at the same time? Thanks for all you guys do. You have strengthened my belief and faith in God. So I wanted to start off with this. If you know a therapist in York County, Pennsylvania, or the accompanying areas that is not given over to the spirit of the age, feel free to email me, steve@stevedeace.com, steve@stevedeace.com, and I will pass it on to Ashley for you at steve@stevedeace.com. By the way, this is anecdotal, but Aaron, I'd be lying if I said I have not heard from people in this audience and other people I know a disproportionate ratio of children on the spectrum who are also being told they are transgendered. Okay. There does seem, I don't know, that correlation equals causation. Sometimes it does. I know we say it never does. That's not true. Sometimes it does. But I don't know if that applies in this case, but it does seem, I do seem to anecdotally hear these two linked quite more often than not, actually.
Yeah, and this is not a new thing. I've seen that bandied about on X, in discourse on X, and that makes it even, in my mind, that makes it even worse. This is not, it's not as if they're just, hey, opportunistic, hey, somebody, going through gender dysphoria, let me tell you you're the sex that you actually aren't. It seems as if when you bring that anecdotally, and what I've seen people talk about on X as well, it makes it seem as if they're preying on that disability. Mm-hmm. So that makes it even worse. And why that is the case, well, if Todd were here, you know where he would go. But that is just wicked and it's evil, and my heart goes out to that emailer.
Matt says, after hearing Aaron read the white trash cuisine Mount Rushmore, I have sunk into a deep depression and sadness, mainly because those are some of my favorite foods. I've never identified as white trash, but I've now realized it's true. As he was saying it, my hair transformed into a mullet. My desire to get another dog fired up, and when I came home, my wife's car was up on the blocks. Now I'm off with my son Aaron to get his name changed. Nice.
Were you listening to Freebird during the course of that transformation? You're transing yourself into a white trash individual. I recommend Freebird. That's a good song.
By the way, since you brought that up, that triggered this in me. Noah came to me the other day. My son comes to me the other day and says, "Hey, if it doesn't interfere with school and stuff, would you mind if I tried to learn guitar this year?" I said, "No, of course not." But I mean, this just kind of seemed like a very random request. I'm like, what inspired this? He goes, "Are you ready for this?" And he was serious too, man. My 17-year-old son looked at me and he said, "I really want to learn how to play Freebird." That's what he said.
Wonderful.
I wasn't sure whether to be proud or appalled. Okay.
Proud.
Yeah, I mean...
The year is 2024. He's, 16 years old?
He just turned 17.
17, yeah. And he wants to learn how to play something from the 70s.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
By the way, have you ever seen Lynyrd Skynyrd's live performance from Oakland? In the 70s?
Hold on. Leonard Skinner felt safe to go to Oakland in the 70s?
Dude, it's not just that.
Okay.
It's not just that. The crowd is massive. I can't remember what stadium they were playing at. The crowd is massive. They're going wild. There's a giant Confederate flag in the background. It's a completely different universe. It's like, what multiverse did we escape from when Leonard Skinner could go play a live, sold-out concert in Oakland with a Confederate flag in the background, Freebird, everybody's rocking out, going crazy, losing their mind. Teleport to 2024 Oakland. It's completely different.
Would you
universe.
open a McDonald's in Oakland?
No.
Yeah. John Wazinski says, so Trump gets sued for exaggerating his wealth and gets fined, but Pfizer exaggerated the safe and effective claim and nothing happens.
Heads I win, tails you lose.
That's correct. Unfortunately, though, I got to mention this because if I don't, my inbox is going to blow up. It was Trump who cut Pfizer the check. We cannot forget this. Okay? It was Trump who cut them the check. But your overall analogy absolutely holds. Yes. We are going to have to learn. And I'm not saying it's fair, man. Fair is an event that occurs on the east side of Des Moines every August. Okay? It's the world in which we live. We're in a post-Christian era. That means our belief system, or those who are viewed as favorable to it or representing it to some degree, are no longer the benefit of the doubt in society. We are the dissidents now. And so this will be hard to accept for those of you that are older. But this is the reality. And we have to accept reality. Doesn't mean we have to embrace it into perpetuity. Doesn't mean we can't try to change it. This isn't, this isn't an incontrovertible reality. It doesn't come from providence or some other force of nature that, we don't have the means within our own humanity to do something about. But until we do, it is reality. And so what does that mean? What it means is the things that maybe we could get away with before. And the culture would say, well, that's a technicality. Well, like in the case of Trump exaggerating his wealth. Oh, you know what? Yeah, man, who in New York has not done that? Because the answer is probably not, too many people, frankly. These are the sorts of things that when you have hegemony in the culture, meaning that your view reigns supreme, and those who are, branded or sincere in representing your view, when that happens, culture looks the other way. We're not in that era anymore. And it's not fair, but it is what it is. We're going to have to really mind P's and Q's and really dot I's and cross T's. During, a lot of you came on board our show during COVID because we could have very well been the first, I guess we would call it, conventionally conservative show maybe, that wasn't in the traditional anti-vax, big pharma, skeptic content sphere that Adele Bigtree was already in, or people like that. We could have very well been the first conventional conservative show outside of that, RFK Jr. native habitat to really go hard in pushing back on the COVID narrative. And our show exploded during that period of time. And even though we were, one of those out in the forefront of that, you guys need to know there were plenty of things that we thought and discussed internally amongst ourselves that never made it on the air, or it took weeks, if not months, or more than a year for them to get on the air because we didn't have the data to assert it yet. Even though we thought it was pretty tangible or plausible that this was what was happening or what was going to happen next. But here's the thing. The amount of censorship and stuff that was going on in that day and age, they were looking. They were looking to shun you. And so that meant that we couldn't cut any corners at all. Like, we couldn't even pontificate just theorizing. We had to nail everything. Remember when we released Fauci and Bargain, Aaron?
Yeah.
And we put more footnotes in there than pages. And remember, I kept telling Todd after the book was released, something's going to get proven wrong. We could not have gotten all of those footnotes right. Well, nobody ever came back and challenged any of those footnotes.
Yeah.
But we had to do our darndest to do that. Why? Because if we were wrong, there was something like 250 footnotes in that book, Aaron. If we were wrong on 2 or 3 of them, they would have used that to discredit the entire book and therefore discredit us. And so here's what this means moving forward. Until this is at least a fair fight institutionally, right now it is not. I mean, before you regain dominance, you at least have to make it a contest. Right? You don't go from, well, Alabama beat us under Nick Saban last year 65-0, so we're going to come back and beat them the next year. No, you're not. You're not making up 65 points in one season. First goal, we're going to make this a fourth quarter game. That the game is still in doubt. We don't want it, we're not seeing Alabama's third string this year. They're not playing, freshman red shirts just to keep them happy so they don't transfer against us this year. We want to see their starting quarterback in the game, having to grind it out at the end. Maybe there's never a threat that we win, but we punched back and made him sweat it out. That's our first step back here. We have to make this a contest again. We are not in any form of constructive opposition to them on any level at all. We're not. Now we're mounting oppositions. Think of groups like Moms for Liberty and others, and that's the start of it. But that game is just beginning. For now, they control every default institution in the country. So therefore, they get the default benefit of the doubt in the country. It's not fair. I would generate a lot more revenue for myself and engagements by screaming here about how unfair this is and behaving as if we don't have to change our behavior at all in light of that. But then I would be, I would be contradicting my core value system. It would not be true. We're going to have to be better. For many years, we thought we were morally better than them. It turned out we weren't. Now we're going to have to be. Moving forward, we're not going to get away with candidates who are wannabe Icaruses, who love playing in the margins and in the grays. That's just not going to fly. I'm sorry, it's not. Every one of those people are getting indicted. Every one of those people are getting convicted. Every one of those people are getting liens. I mean, we are going to have to, it's the words of Christ. Right out of the Sermon on the Mount, paraphrasing here. Be of good character so that not even the pagans can bring a claim against you. It doesn't mean that they won't, by the way. They still will. But in that case, though, since we didn't give them anything, we didn't. What's being done to Trump here is wrong. But I absolutely believe he's guilty of it. Because I think it's just a very common practice from wealthy people in New York to try to get around the draconian tax and regulation system there. Donald Trump was probably doing this in 1982, 1992, 2002, 2012. They probably had no problem with it while he was doing it all those years, though, Aaron, right? Mm-hmm. All those years he was doing that, it was totally fine. He runs for president as a Republican. Suddenly it's not fine now. Because you're not in the club now. You're not in the club now. You're out. So they're going to do it now anyway. But when they do that, then it needs to be a lie, an obvious lie, because then it impugns their character by bringing the charge. An obvious lie. moving forward, we're going to have to, I know we're tempted right now to devalue character even more. That's actually the wrong tactic. We're going to have to actually value it even more moving forward. We simply just cannot run candidates, particularly for high national office in contested, either if you're trying to win a national election or an election of national significance. We are not going to beat them with candidates who have too many gray areas. We're not. I mean, they just have all the institutions to just destroy that person for things that previous generations would have considered the equivalent of ripping off mattress tags. But that's the reality of the era in which we live. We can yell about it. We can scream about it. We can forget about it. We can deny it. But then we'd be denying reality. That would be our own version of trannyism, just creating our own reality that isn't true and suffering the consequences therein. So I'm probably this is largely falling on deaf ears in the oldest generation. It's just always hard for the oldest generation to change with the times in any era, frankly. That's not new. All right. So if you're Gen X or younger, this is the reality of the world that we are now in. We are going to have to value character more than ever before. Because anything, search histories, anything. They have all the institutions they want and need to destroy somebody with that. That's just the reality, Aaron. I don't see, am I exaggerating here?
No, Scripture is rife and consistent on something, and that is when the authors of pick your book, when you're listing qualities, when you're listing qualifications, when you're listing punishments, when you're listing groups of people or characteristics of people, Scripture is pretty consistent that the very first thing listed is the priority, is the highest priority. Just start with the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not have any other gods before me. There's a reason why that's at the top. You go into the New Testament when talking about the qualifications for leadership in 1 Timothy, leadership of the church. What is the very first thing that's listed in 1 Timothy? Overseer must be above reproach. We cannot live sinless lives, even with the Holy Spirit within us. We strive to. We cannot live sinless lives. But as you said, we must be above reproach. Because the reality is, they are. Ask Mark Houck. Ask those pro-lifers in Tennessee. Mm-hmm. Now, were their lives completely above reproach? I don't know. But the crime that they were allegedly thrown in prison for was above reproach. They were doing righteous deeds. That didn't stop the state from chucking them in prison. But the motivation here to live above reproach is that when I do that and they still throw me in prison, they can sentence me to prison, but they're damning themselves. We don't cheer for that. We don't root for that. Ultimately, we want those people to come into the fold, but that is the effect. People will see that around those situations. People will see the injustice. The Imago Dei is still on every human being's soul. And they will see that injustice. And hopefully it will point them to the true source of justice in the long run. We have to start playing the long game. We haven't been. When I talk about we, I'm talking about the church specifically, but let's just talk about the right. We have to start playing the long game. We have to start understanding that, as Jesse Kelly, I think, writes in his book, The Anti-Communist Manifesto, we might never see, and we probably never will see. If we even started right now taking all of the steps of fighting back against the spirit of the age that are necessary to eventually beat back, we have to embrace and accept the fact we will never see the fruits of our labors. Our children might never even see the fruits of our labors or theirs if we raise them correctly. But that's the long game that you have to have in the back of your mind. And it starts by valuing, as you said, to bring this full circle, character. Because we cannot make it easy for them to chuck us in prison. We make them fight for every single inch that they take.
Amen. I mean, the New Testament's the most read book or compilation of books in human history. Let's do the math. Jesus, did he go to prison?
Yeah.
Yeah. Paul, go to prison?
Yeah.
Peter, go to prison? Yeah. John, go to prison. Yep. So that leaves us with Luke, right? Who wrote his epistle in Acts. Off the top of my head, did he go to prison? I don't know the answer to that. But even if he didn't, likely he did, given the level of persecution that was going on during that era. But we're at what, 4 out of 5?
Mm-hmm.
That's 80% odds. Okay. So minimum 80% not knowing the fullness of Luke's history, history off the top of my head. We're at a minimum 80% of the authors of the New Testament went to prison. So just to back up what Aaron said there. And that's key too. I like the distinction about above reproach is not the same as perfection. Above reproach means that I'm open about my flaws. I'm willing to accept accountability for my flaws. I accept I have flaws. I'm working on my flaws. I don't excuse them. They're not, you don't have to just accept them at face value and then endorse them at the exact same time. Okay, that's part of character too. So I thought that was an excellent distinction there. I was raised in a Christian home, but with sporadic church attendance. I'm an Air Force brat. My dad was career fighter pilot for 20 years, and I was 14 when he retired. The constant moving made me the new kid in school every 2 years, so I can relate to your experience in that regard. I became serious in my faith after seeing The Exorcist while in high school, and I reasoned that, if there's demons, then there must be a God. The reality of evil is proof to me of the reality of Jesus. My wife and I have raised 4 sons in Michigan, and have made every effort to bring them up as in a Christian upbringing. We attended church regularly all through their school years. I was active in the church youth group as a small group leader until my youngest son graduated from high school. In hindsight, I wish we had homeschooled them to insulate them from the influence of the government schools. With what is happening now, it would be unthinkable for us to send kids there these days. My third son is still living at home until he completes his degree in chemical engineering. He's on the dean's list and may be too smart for his own good. Sounds like the kid in my favorite Rankin Bass special. 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. The smart mouse, Albert, who doesn't believe in Santa because he can't take things on faith, so he wrecks the clock. I love that special, by the way. He'll graduate this summer and likely move from the area. He is an adamant believer in evolution and denies creation. One would think with his field of study, he'd be amazed at the complexities of all that is and would reason that there must be a creator. I believe you stated that you were initially suspect of Christianity and that you researched the resurrection to prove to yourself that Jesus did walk out of the tomb. Something like he either walked out of the tomb or he didn't. If he did, then it is real. How did you prove this to yourself? What resources would you suggest? I would greatly appreciate your input if you could find the time. I've tried various means of reaching my son. When The Passion was released, he agreed to go to the theater with me to see it. Amazingly, it did not reach him. I loved your movie Nefarious. I thought it would have the same effect on him that The Exorcist had on me. I had him watch your movie's trailer, but he said that's just not his style. I saw your movie in theater, have a copy of it on DVD. I still hope to convince him to watch it with me. Keep up the great work. The unoffended boomer, Bill Kane. Excellent questions, Bill. I have 2 answers for you. Number 1, the Holy Spirit. I didn't convince myself of anything. And we can get into, was I elected? Was I selected? Did I do the selecting to some degree along with the wooing of God's will? That is a conversation for another time. But ultimately, faith comes from the hearing of the word of God. So I didn't convince myself of anything. The Holy Spirit convinced me. In that regard, one of the most prolific Christian apologists of the 20th century, Josh McDowell, grew up with a drunk for a dad. He was an atheist. He originally investigated Christianity to disprove it on a bet because he thought it was easy to do. And when he couldn't, it ended up, the research he did, when he couldn't disprove it as easily as he thought, ended up inspiring his first 2 books. I can't remember which order they were released. More Than a Carpenter And is it Ready Defense is the other one, Aaron?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. I would urge, challenge your son to read those two books. And tell him, hey, if you don't find what's presented in here compelling, I'll never bring it up again. And don't. Keep your word. But this brings me to the second point. I mean, I pray for your son a lot. There was another great Christian apologist who started off godless. His name was Augustine. His mother, Monica, prayed for him for 30 years. And eventually, the Holy Spirit turned him into the most influential post-biblical era thinker, maybe in the history of the Christian church. So I take McDowell's first couple of books. Oh, Evidence That Demands a Verdict. That's what it's called. I just realized
right.
it. Yeah. More Than a Carpenter and Evidence That Demands a Verdict. Those are the names of those first two books. I challenge your son, hey, give these a shot. And if you think this is still bunk, I love you to death. I'll never bring it up again. And he may not take the challenge or may come back and say, remember, we don't want to believe. We want to sin. We're not basically good. We want to do our own thing. We want to be our own gods. He's your son. You love him. You hugged him when he was younger. Hopefully you still do now. You played catch with him, taught him to ride a bike. You did all that stuff. He's a sinner still, as were you. He wants to sin. Without the Holy Spirit, that's what we will do. That's what we want to do. We want to go our own way. All are like sheep and led astray. There are none righteous, not a single one. None would choose him. So challenge his pride intellectually as a dad. Hey, read these two books. If you do, I'll never bring it up, bug you about it the rest of your life. If it's still, you don't want to explore it anymore, because intellectually, you and I aren't going to come up with better than what Josh McDowell did in those books, brother. But then in the meantime, if it goes wrong, I pray incessantly for your son. Aaron, you want to add anything real quick?
We just watched Oppenheimer at our house over the period of 2 nights, and it struck something within me. You know, some of the most brilliant scientists and theorists who played a heavy hand in bringing about some of the biggest and most mind-blowing breakthroughs saw themselves as their own God, a God unto themselves, despite having intricate knowledge of some of the most intricate parts of God's design. I think you need to accept the fact that maybe the more brilliant your son is, the harder it might be for him to accept God. For whatever reason, give it to him.
More in a moment. Every year, our culture seems to sink deeper and deeper into quicksand. Our moral compass no longer automatically points to the true north of truth and godliness. So it's time for the men of this country to rise, put on the full armor of God so they can be the leaders he's called them to be. Take a stand against the evil forces that are threatening our culture. And that's what's inspired our colleague Jason Whitlock to organize an event called Fearless Army Roll Call 2.0. It's brought to you this year by Preborn. It's an all-day event in Nashville, Tennessee on June 1st that will bring these men together under a united banner of godliness and responsibility. At this conference, you'll hear speeches from Jason and several special guests. If you want to have your heart and mind filled with messages that God wants you to hear and share fellowship with fellow believers, go to fearlessarmyrollcall.com to reserve your spot today. Fearlessarmyrollcall.com. Fearlessarmyrollcall.com. Brought to you by Preborn. By the way, I've gotten several already for Ashley Vaccaro. We mentioned her note at the top of the hour. Several, just on the surface, what looked like promising leads for her. I did pass those on. So you guys are great, man. Thank you very much for that. I'm sure Ashley, I speak for her, not ever meeting her, that she's probably very appreciative to get such a quick response as well. So thank you guys. All right, let's get back to Feedback Friday. Where do I want to go next? Let's Because, man, there's several of these I want to get Todd's reaction to. Because a couple of them reference him specifically. All right, let's do this one. Jack says, I have two areas I would appreciate your thoughts. The role of civil governance is one area Jesus did address. What is the best explanation for the three institutions Jesus created, family, church, and government, as directed by Jesus? I am working with LifeWise Academy to assist in biblical education. Dealing with multiple denominations in our town has made the differences in beliefs challenging. How do you identify the close hand versus open hand beliefs of Christianity? I'm going to focus on the second part, because if we don't focus on the second part, we're probably never going to be able to answer for you successfully the first. Okay. But in my closed hand, these are my convictions. These are things that not even for my wife and my children would I compromise. Why? Because they speak specifically to my direct, unique, and individual relationship with my Creator, with my Lord, with my Savior. And nothing can come between that. I'm commanded by Him to love Him with all my heart, soul, strength, and mind. And so I can't let you get in the way of that. My own soul is at stake. As much as I love my wife and I love my kids, I love my mama who gave me birth at 15. I love all of you who give me a paycheck. I could roll out of here after this show. Something could happen. My wife was just telling me about that she read a story about a woman who was on vacation, and husband, healthy as an ox, not that much older than me, just had a widowmaker right there. That was it while they were on vacation. He dipped right there. We never know. Any moment, God calls me home. And when that occurs, when I arrive in eternity, I will face Him alone. None of the people that I love and cherish in this life the most will stand there with me. It's going to be Him and I, eye to eye. So you can't come between that. These are my convictions. Because my fate, there's a reason why when you're on an airplane and they do that disclaimer, the safety message that nobody pays attention to at the beginning, if you ever did pay attention to it, when they tell you that when the masks drop, what do they tell you to do first?
Put yours on.
Put yours on first. Because you're of no use to anybody else if you can't breathe. You can't help anybody else. So put yours on first. So without those convictions, by the way, I also cannot be the husband Amy wants me to be, the dad Noah and Anna and Zoe want me to be, the son my mom wants me to be, the host you want me to be. I can't be those things without these things in my closed hand, my convictions. I can't be what all these other people I love and cherish want me to be without them anyway. So nothing comes between me and what's in this closed hand. Now, I don't have 80 things in this closed hand. I haven't counted them recently. There's probably a dozen or less. These are things I'm banking my soul on, my eternity on. Now, in my open hand, so my closed hand, I have convictions. In my open hand, I have positions. Frankly, most of what we discuss on this show are positions. Because my convictions really aren't up for much discussion. Like we haven't, we have a wide swath of theological thought on this show. And so we're going to start a Bible study next month. It'll be only the second one we've ever done. We did one a few years ago, and I think it was pre-COVID we did it. And I chose Colossians, specifically to deal with the divinity of Christ, the Christology, the Trinity. But, we haven't done a lot of Theology Thursdays, Aaron, on the Trinity. We haven't. I don't put my convictions up for discussion very often. Most of what we discuss on a show like this are positions. That's where there's much more rich discussion to be had. I mean, I don't know how else to, I absolutely believe if you don't believe in the triune God, you aren't worshiping the God of the Bible, no matter what else you claim. And I absolutely believe, therefore, your eternal soul is at risk. Those are my convictions, Aaron. How do we do a 2-hour discussion of that? It's pretty point blank.
Yep.
So the 2-hour discussions we often have from a biblical worldview standpoint are on the positions, because those are areas where things aren't as clearly defined, and we need to work our salvation out with fear and trembling. We need to come now and let us reason together. Iron can sharpen iron. And even though I may have very strong views on these positions, they can be changed. Sometimes they have been. And in this hand, this open hand, I have all kinds of things. So if you want unity within the brethren, to your point of the original email, actually vet what's in your closed hand and whether it deserves to be there or not. And by the way, if you've got different denominations who think differently about certain aspects and roles of positions, why not include those differing positions and treat the people, the students that'll take your curriculum like adults or critical thinkers made in the image of God? And hey, here's what Methodists think of this. Here's what Catholics think of that. Let's hash it out in the classroom, right? What's wrong with that? I don't think anything. There's this notion out there that that we are arguing too much. Wrong. We're screaming at each other too much, Aaron. That's true. Okay? We're not actually arguing at all. Right? We're not having any arguments. We are not. We're and I love memes as much as the next guy. They're a great way to communicate in this day and age, but we're coming up with snotty memes about one another and calling that an argument. That's not an exchange of ideas. Let me tell you, if there's one thing the spirit of the age is afraid of after the truth, it's arguments, because that's actually how the truth comes out. We're not arguing really at all. Yelling and screaming at each other, it can be an argument. Sometimes arguments can get heated and need to be. But most of the time in our culture, those are substitutes for an actual argument. And so we're not arguing at all. So if you've got some ambiguity in some areas with the different groups, Jack, that you're aligning for your project, and they're in the open hand, if they're in the closed hand, there's no ambiguity, brother. If they're in the open hand, why did St. Nicholas get up and punch Arius? Well, he violated his closed hand. See what I did there? Okay, I know it's kind of lame. But if these are open-handed things, incorporate that into the curriculum. Let the class hash it out. The instructors have these discussions. Nothing wrong with that. The men who wrote the New Testament, they had councils in Jerusalem. They hashed things out. The canonization of the Bible at Nicaea happened because a group of bishops, including Nicholas, got together and hashed things out. Nothing wrong with that. Don't be afraid of arguing at all. Encourage it, actually. Screaming at each other over Snapchat isn't an argument. It's just douchery. Nothing wrong with an argument, though. Need more of them, in fact. Where do I want to go next? Man, let me answer this question right in Todd's wheelhouse, since he's not here specifically.
Perfect.
Okay. LP wants to know, would I get a vaccine to go on a mission trip? Number one, my life is not my own. I was bought at a high price. Now, first of all, let's define mission trip. Like am I going, with my class to do a work project in Peru for a week? My answer in that case would probably be no. I wouldn't let you experiment on me for that. If I am invested into, especially because where else there's a lot, there are a ton of places here at home that won't demand that of you, that you could use some work projects done.
Yeah.
We don't have any urban blight areas that could use some work projects.
A few.
Yeah, you don't have to go to another hemisphere for that. Okay? If we're talking, though, that I am invested in being a missionary as a calling, then my answer would be yeah, probably. I mean, I would want to know. I'd do my research just to make sure, because, going back to the analogy I just drew of when the mask drops, put yours on first. If I'm unknowingly injecting myself with something that, like the COVID jab, for example, that there is no benefit. There is no benefit to the COVID jab. Only loss. None. But if I am called into missionary work, well, my Lord tells me my life is not my own. I was bought at a high price. At any point, I could encounter hostile peoples that would take my life. They are offended at what I am teaching. So at that point in time, my answer to this, Aaron, would be different than if we're talking about a temporary event. I'm going to do a work project or something in Mexico or Peru or someplace for a week or two. I could do a lot of those here. If that's missionary work now, there's a lot of places here at home that won't demand that of you that could use that work. My answer would be no. But if I'm a missionary, that's my calling, then at that point, that's my way of offering my body up as a living sacrifice, not to the spirit of the age, but for those that God is calling me to minister to, so that they don't end up with the enemy. Aaron, I want to get your answer to this after we talk about real estate agents I trust. I'm convinced we're going to see a glut release, pressure release valve in the housing market here in the second and third quarters. And even though who knows what that'll mean with interest rates and everything else, but there's so much unspent inventory out there that eventually, it's like gravity. It's got to go somewhere, which means a lot of you in this audience could be a part of that mini boom market. Now is a great time to make sure you've got a real estate agent you can trust to help you navigate these Biden-infested waters, if you will. Where would you find such a person? Well, it's Glenn Beck's company, realestateagentsitrust.com. Best agents in your area, top sellers. They know the lay of the land, best practices to get you and your family where you want to go. Whether where you want to go is just, you want to upgrade or downgrade in your own neighborhood, or you've got to move to a whole new hood. They can help you either way, whether it's down the street or across the country. Most of these agents, by the way, fans of the Blaze. So you got a common value system in common with them. That's good too. This is where you need to go. realestateagentsitrust.com. Again, that's realestateagentsitrust.com. The name says it all. realestateagentsitrust.com. Aaron, I gave you the last word.
Well, this, I think, is a more interesting thought experiment, actually, than maybe we've led on. So, under the scenario that you are certain, something just short of an audible voice of God, that you are to go to a different hemisphere in order to do God's work in evangelization and discipleship for a long period of time. You are to be a missionary here at this particular place because this is the burden that God has put on your heart. But what's standing in the way between you and that burden, you and that mission, is taking, let's say, the COVID jab. There's no way, apparently, under this circumstance, this thought experiment, to get from point A to point B without taking the COVID jab. Is it in the character of God to make you do something, to put a burden on your heart, to do something, but it requires you drinking hemlock? You see what I'm getting at?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't think that's within the character of God necessarily. But then again, Abraham, go sacrifice your son. So I don't think that necessarily applies here. But that is, on the one hand, you're kind of asking a question that is that's out of order, because you're asking something. If we're talking specifically about the COVID jab, I don't think it's in the character of God for you to take poison in order to do his work. On the other hand, sometimes God gives us things that we don't quite understand. Mm-hmm. So I err on the former. I don't think it would be in the character of God to ask you to do something that is destructive of his temple. But you might see it differently.
Do you agree with my meta assertion, though? Maybe I'm wrong, that if you are specifically called to missionary work, there is a different standard there. This is the field of battle that you are called to serve in, and there's a different risk level, therefore you're willing to accrue or embrace as a result of honoring that calling, right? All right, good stuff. We're going to stick around and do overtime for Blaze TV subscribers. For the rest of you, see you Monday. Till then, Romans 8:28.